So, on behalf of A Better Grimsby, welcome to our discussion of regional issues. I'm Phil Bessling, your host. Now, we had originally intended for this evening to be a two-part debate for the position of mayor and regional councillor. However, as two of the candidates declined our invitation, which was open right up to the last minute of last night, that concept was not going to work. We get limited coverage of the goings-on in regional council, where the majority of our realty taxes go. And we came to the conclusion that an explanation of what is actually happening at that council would be in order. And in that case, we have invited Mr. Grant LaFleche from the St. Catharines Standard, which really is exciting. And we've asked Jeff Jordan, mayoralty candidate, and Wayne candidate for the regional council, to give us their thoughts on how best to serve the interests of Grimsby at the region. You will notice that there are yellow pieces of paper along the aisles with pens, and that is for you to write questions, and we welcome your questions. If you do not have pen and paper in your aisle, raise your hand, and we will have someone get you paper. So before I go any further, I should also remind you that washrooms are in the lobby to the east. Their exits are appropriately marked. There's not much more I need to add, so in that case, I will turn it over to Debbie, who's our moderator. Debbie Zimmerman, former town councillor, former regional councillor, and former regional chair. So I think more than qualified to discuss regional issues. So that's Debbie.
Thank you very much, Phil. I hope everybody can hear me, and I know there's a tiny bit of a feedback, but can everybody hear me at the back? Great, great. Thank you so much for coming tonight, and I just wanted to let you know this is my third debate that I have moderated, and it's been terrific, the turnout, and it's great to see so many people out tonight. And tomorrow night for Ward 1 at the Grimsby Legion, for anybody that's interested, it'll be starting again at 7 o'clock. I just want to read something that, and some of this is you've heard before. I promise you I've changed the quote though at the end, so it's not the same quote. I believe that a democracy is built through open societies that share information. That when we share information, we become more knowledgeable and aware of the issues and the facts. That when there is debate, we can find solutions together. And that's why you're here tonight, for an open conversation. So let's begin. These guys are standing, we're going to let them sit down and try to get comfortable. So each of the candidates, I'm going to ask, they kind of know the rules of the debate. Really, there will be limited rules because they wouldn't be debating with each other, unfortunately. The mayor has nobody to debate with, and the regional councillor has nobody to debate with. But we're going to give them some questions. We're going to ask them to define some of the issues that have been touched on through the other debates. And then we would like you to forward some questions to us, so that we can give them to the candidates. This is being live streamed, which means it is going to be available to people online. So there will be questions coming through as well. So thank you very much for being here. It's Scott, right? John Cook, right? Yay. Sorry about that. So John is here, and I thank you very much for that. And then what I'd like to do though, I'm going to introduce Grant, because I think that's important. He's agreed to be here tonight, and I'm going to give you a little bit of his background. And I think what is important why Grant is here is because we do not get a lot of news about the region at this part, in Grimsby, the region, what's going on in the region in Grimsby. So Grant is an award-winning investigative reporter and columnist for the St. Catharines Standard. He started at the St. Catharines Standard in 1998, and Grant's been nominated for 23 Ontario Newspaper Awards and 3 National Newspaper Awards. He won a National Newspaper Award and an Ontario Newspaper Award this year for an investigative series on clergy abuse in Niagara, and was nominated for the Ontario Newspaper Award Journalist of the Year. Good morning. Yes. His work appears in Tor Stars and Niagara's daily newspapers, the Hamilton Spectator, the Toronto Star. His work previously appeared in the Toronto Sun and the National Post. No slouch. Grant was also the host of the Standards Lake to Lake podcast, and currently is the host of the paper's Inside the Newsroom podcast. Grant has been a featured commentator on CBC Radio, the History Channel, and is a weekly guest in the Thursday edition of CKTV in St. Catharines with Tom McConnell. Grant's recent work includes months of investigative stories on the Niagara region, and for those of you who have not seen it, you can go to the Standards webpage, and there's quite a bit of links. There's the links there. This is important because I think it is a commentary on what's going on today. His stories uncovered the regional councillor expense scandal, the truth behind the $1 million buyout of the police chief, the attempts by regional politicians to get the newspaper's management fired, and the NPCA, Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority contract issues. His most recent expose uncovered the tainted CAO officer hiring process at the region and triggered an Ontario Ombudsman probe, which is still ongoing. He is also a boxer, so don't mess with him. Grant's preamble tonight will be about the Standard's recent work on the CAO hiring contract, how the paper got the story, and why this is important to Niagara residents. He will also talk in his own way about why it's important to vote, and he is going to bring us an update on the Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority, which will be important. In the meantime, before we get started on all of this discussion, I'm going to ask each one of our candidates to bring a little bit of a preamble. You have 2 minutes. We still have a bell. Rob has a bell, and he has a warning as well, so we will cut you off. So since, Jeff, you don't mind, we will digress and we'll defer to the regional councillor running for regional council, waiting for it.
Thanks, Debbie, and thank you, Better Grimsby, for bringing the voters together. And voting is really an important issue for us because it's where our money goes. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen of Grimsby, after all that has been recently disclosed by the Ombudsman and the Auditor General, I simply ask you, who do you want representing Grimsby's interest at the region? I believe the choice that you have to make is based on character and trust. I am Wayne Furtick, and I firmly believe that I am your better choice. And I want to clarify something that was said last night and that I've been called a liar. And I want it to be understood that the NPCA that was audited by the Audit General has pointed out that the entire board is the fault. Last night I said that Mr. Tony Quirk was the fault. He's my opponent. The other candidates like Sandy Nunziato, Bruce Timms, and the rest of them, they're not my opponents. So I don't have to tell you that there's other board members. But I want to say this, please. Now I got to take the glasses off. The candidate I would like to make this quite clear that while the regional councillor Tony Quirk is not solely responsible for the significant operational issues identified by the Auditor General report on the Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority, but he is certainly an equal, responsible person as another board member. On page 2 of the report, it says the NPCA needs to restore community trust by making improvements in the areas of human resources, procurement, capital planning, flood mapping, restoration programming, complaint, follow-up, and violation enforcement, review of development proposals and permit applications, and performance measurement and public reporting. That condemnation basically covers every area of the NPCA's responsibilities. And I have also, if you wish, to go to the Auditor General's press release. And it's a 103-page report. Having said that, I just want to clarify that only because Mr. Cork is my opponent, not the other people on the board of directors. Now I'd like to share a bit about some thoughts that we enjoyed today were visionary at the time and were achieved from the shared efforts of my 13 years on the council. Twin Pad Arena, the library, the art gallery, the public cemetery on the mountain, Niagara Welcome Center, just across from Casablanca, and most of all, the GO service in Grimsby. Some may crow about bringing GO train service for some time in the future. It was myself and Chair Zimmerman who brought this vital service. These things I'm proud of and have done for you. So let me start with 2 simple changes. We'll get your garbage picked up, and this regional council will show you our council chambers. I look forward to serving you once again. Thank you.
Hello everyone. I would like to thank the Better Grimsby for hosting tonight's event and for everyone who came here tonight to ask questions and to learn more about my views and to start Grimsby on opening up and being more transparent. An open and communicative dialogue between a candidate and residents is the key to ensure that the voting public can make an informed decision. For those who may be new to town and not know me, I'm Jeff Jordan, and Grimsby is my home. I was born here at West Lincoln Memorial Hospital, grew up here. After University of Guelph, I moved back here, continued on my business here, Jordan's Garden Store, and now we operate Nixon Farms. And I will continue to live in Grimsby. We as residents are fortunate to live in a place with a rich and vibrant history, a friendly small town charm, and most notably, a great sense of community. Many residents, however, have expressed growing concerns that Grimsby is slowly losing those attributes that make our town special. With council welcoming unrestrained big city growth and an unwillingness to protect their natural heritage and lack of transparency from our current elected officials. This election presents voters with not just the choice of who to elect as mayor, but also how Grimsby's future will be shaped. I pledge to fix what is broken at Town Hall and bring forth the change the community deserves. The lack of transparency and accountability at the hands of our current council is no secret. What is secret are the financial details of our tangled web of hydro companies that my fellow candidate, who unfortunately is not here tonight, sits on as a board member. As mayor, I will ensure that Town Hall and Council are a safe and welcoming place, an environment for all, where openness and transparency are our guiding principles. I will work hard to bring you the change you are asking for. We can be better together. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Jeff and Wayne. Now I'm going to go into what I'd like to do is ask everyone to keep firing up those questions. And I'm going to ask Grant to talk about the hiring of the CAO for the region and the investigation that took place. Then I'm going to try to break this up with a bit of questions from the audience. And then we can also, Grant may want to have a moment or two to ask some questions of both the candidates. So are you comfortable there, Grant?
Yeah.
Just to do a preamble? So, fire away.
Can everybody hear me all right? We good? Okay. So, just as a quick thing, this is an unusual situation for a journalist to be in, not sitting between two candidates. It's just that I'm not running for a blessed thing, and I'm not here to convince you that I'm the best guy on the block to do anything. Usually I'm putting feet to the fire, but it's not a proper debate. So my job here tonight is just to kind of explain to you what we've uncovered at the St. Catharines Standard in some of our reporting on Niagara Region, and what it means, what the situation is, and a little bit in a pretty truncated fashion the time that we've got, how we got the story. Because one of our major preoccupations at the Standard right now, and so with Torstar broadly, is to talk about transparency in journalism. How did we get the stories? Why can you trust us over another source that's not doing as robust a job and getting the facts and getting the truth? So the two issues that Debbie mentioned at the outset are kind of the two that has everybody watching the paper, and I think has engaged a lot of people politically. I mean, certainly, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, Deb, but 4 years ago, I don't know that we would nearly fill a church talking about the regional election. It just wouldn't happen. The two big issues that we've uncovered, the first was the one really driven by the Standard and some of the work that I did on the hiring of the Chief Administrative Officer, a guy by the name of Carmen D'Angelo at Niagara Region. Just a quick show of hands, how many of you have been following the story, just so I can get a sense as to, wow, okay. Well, I'm done, actually, I can go home. Well, essentially what we found out was this, to kind of give you the Reader's Digest version. In November 2017, through sources that we had developed over years, I got access to thousands of pages of secret and confidential documents about the regional government. A great deal of it was routine and some of it was uninteresting, but there were several pieces of information that showed us that when Carmen D'Angelo was hired as the CAO in 2016, he had downloaded, we now know, my initial reporting was one document, we've now up to 6 documents that no candidate for that job should have had. 4 of those documents at least were provided by, or written by rather, members of the regional chair Al Caslin's personal staff, his policy director, a guy named Robert Damois, and his communications director, Jason Tamming. We also know that even before the previous CAO had left his job, Carmen D'Angelo was getting draft copies of unfinished reports on the CAO position. This was completely unprecedented and tainted the hiring process. And you know, when you apply for a job in the public service, which is paid for by you, the Chief Administrative Officer and CAO in Niagara Region gets paid in the neighborhood of $230,000 a year, which is not what most of us in this room come close to making on an annual basis. And so that's why there's checks and balances in place to make sure the hiring is fair. And what we found in our reporting is that not only was it not fair, but it was sort of the fix was in from the beginning. And we now know that our reporting, oddly, has been substantially confirmed by the people who have been criticizing the paper. And we know that these documents were written by members of Al Caslin's staff. We know that Mr. D'Angelo had them. One of the things that we were able to confirm when we had these documents, they're all digital, and there's information embedded in digital documents that if you have experts working with you, you know how to look at it, you can see when they were written, who they were written by, when they were downloaded. And so we had this treasure trove of information that showed us this process had happened. And then I spent months talking to staff at the region, people who would be in the know, basically following the Bob Woodward method of reporting, which is I meet people late at night in strange places in their homes and talk to them about the story. And so it takes a long time to develop those sources. Like I say, we started in November 2017. Our first story was published in April of this year. That was the first document. By the time we got to July, we now had 4 documents, and we started calling the story All the Chairs Men. And then more recently, we now know it's up to 6. All of this essentially has compounded itself into an Ontario Ombudsman's investigation. The Ombudsman, for those of you who don't know, is an arm's-length government investigator whose job it is to investigate municipalities to make sure they're doing what they're supposed to be doing properly. For context, this council, and it's unprecedented for Ontario, this investigation that's going on is the 3rd Ombudsman's investigation of regional council this term. That does not happen in most other municipalities in Ontario. The first was in 2015 when they held a legal meeting to talk about long-term care, which I know is also an important issue in Grimsby. The second was when they illegally seized my colleague Bill Sawchuk's notes and computer during a council meeting. And the third is to now investigate the hiring of the CAO. And a piece that came out of that was Chair Caslin unilaterally extended his contract, kind of like J. Edgar Hoover at the FBI kind of made him CAO for life. He's extended him to I think 2021 without council's approval. Can you hear me okay? I'm getting a... You want me to hit myself in the face with the microphone? Okay. No, good for now. The other story that Deb alluded to is the MPCA, which I know we're going to talk about. These gentlemen will be talking about tonight. And there was. Are you familiar with the Auditor General's audit of the MPCA? Get a quick show of hands. Less so. For shame. Essentially, the MPCA has spent years being criticized by members of this community, communities across Niagara, for a whole host of problems which range from employment issues to the way in which they are not doing some conservation work, to an issue in Niagara Falls called Thunder and Waters, which would be a meeting we could have for about 5 hours all on our own tonight. Finally, after years and years and years of people asking for it, the Auditor General did an investigation of the MPCA. The report was released last week. Wayne referenced it at the beginning of the night. I've never quite seen a report like it. Usually when you get investigations into government agencies, they tend to be limited. Sort of, they've done one thing wrong, or there've been a couple of mistakes. What the Auditor General of Mine was found were systemic problems from the ground up. Human resources, how they get contracts, how they spend their money and what they're not spending their money on, how the board gets inappropriately involved in the day-to-day operations of the NPCA. It's a very long report. It's 100+ pages. However, it does sort of show this deep problem within the agency, and it hasn't really been fixed. So the update, for those of you who haven't seen the news today, is Niagara Centre MPP Jeff Birch, who's with the NPP, which I know they don't get a lot of votes, I think, the NPP, really, do they? From the murmuring, I take it that's true.
Stay on top.
Sorry. In any case, Mr. Birch asked the Minister of the Environment and Conservation if he would bring in a supervisor to kind of clean the deck, get rid of the board of directors, who are almost all regional councillors from Niagara. There's a handful, a minority who are from Hamilton, but they do not hold the balance of power on that board at all. It's regional councillors who do, including Mr. Quirk, who's a leading member of that board. And Mr. Birch was saying, wipe them all away, bring in a provincially appointed supervisor who sort of reform the organization on a go-forward basis. The minister did not agree to that. He did say, however, the government is taking the report very seriously. And interestingly, the minister said, we're going to work with area municipalities, so a place like Grimsby, to make sure the NPCA enacts the recommendations of the Auditor General, of which there are 24. And that's interesting, and I can leave it here, is just that he didn't say, we're going to work closely with the NPCA board. They're going to work with the town of Grimsby and the city of St. Catharines and the town of Lincoln and so on, which is an interesting way to approach it. So he actually said the issues that they found in the NPCA are not reflected in the other conservation authorities in Ontario. So just like there are 3 ombudsman investigations into Niagara region in a single year, which is really unprecedented, so is it a little bit unprecedented that the Auditor General has done an investigation into a conservation authority and the minister is saying, the newly elected minister is saying, well, this doesn't reflect the rest of the conservation authorities in this province. It's this one problem child. So these stories reflect, I think, real important for you as voters to pay attention to who you're voting for. Right? There's the old saying that you get the government that you deserve. And when you have apathetic voters, when you have people who aren't engaged, when you have people who don't come out to meetings like this, who don't go to the ballot box on voting day, you tend to get bad government, is what happens. So, Edward R. Murrow, at the height of the McCarthy era in the United States, used to say, now is not the time for people who are opposed to Senator McCarthy's methods to stay silent, nor those who approve. So the message I would give to you as a journalist is to say, whether you agree with these two gentlemen up here, whether you agree with regional council as it's currently composed, or whether you agree with the MPCA, whether you agree with Mr. Quirk or not, wherever your position is on these politicians and their policies and their records, you have to vote. You have to do it. It's the one fundamental right you have in democracy. The voter turnout in Niagara last time around, I think Grimsby fares better, but overall, 37% of eligible voters in 2014 cast their ballot, which means more than 60% of Niagara voters chose to disenfranchise themselves. There are places in the world where the transfer of government involves a lot of bloodshed and guns and people in jail, and people like me who write things that journalists or that politicians don't like end up in jail or worse. You have this opportunity, by the fluke circumstance of having been born in Canada, to peacefully choose who's going to represent you and if there's going to be a change in government. To lay down that responsibility is somewhat disgraceful. So make sure on the 22nd you get out and vote. It's not for me to tell you who to vote for, but it is for me to tell you to vote. Exercise your vote.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to give Grant you a question. Well, I'm going to get some questions from the panelists at the front here. I guess the question, because you did so much investigation, what was the involvement of the representation from Grimsby, for example? And I would ask, because 52% of the taxes paid, property taxes, are paid to the region. So, I mean, the regional councillors are the mayor and the regional councillor. So what was the involvement of either one of them?
On the CAO issue, so we're going through both of Grimsby's representatives, so Mayor Bentley and Councillor Quirk. Mayor Bentley was mostly arm's length, or wasn't really involved at all because he didn't sit on the deciding committee. So on the CAO hiring of the region, he was not in the hiring committee. Mr. Quirk was, so he played a direct role in terms of the way that hiring process went forward, and ultimately that committee voted unanimously. You can go onto the Standards website, you see the entire membership of that committee, of which Mr. Quirk was a member, but they voted unanimously to hire Mr. D'Angelo as the CAO. There are a number of questions that we've had over the course of our investigation, which some of them were directed right at Chair Kazan. In other words, what did the chair know and when did he know it? That's also true of the selection committee members who were very reluctant to speak to us in the course of our investigation. So we don't know a great deal about what Mr. Quirk thinks about the hiring process, what he thinks about the documents that were accessed by Mr. D'Angelo. We know at Regional Council he did try to cast some aspersions on our reporting, saying that the documents were, well, first he said they didn't exist, and then if they did exist, they were faked, and then if they did exist and were faked, Mr. D'Angelo didn't have them, and then if they did exist and were faked, and he had them, it didn't matter.
Sounds like what I went through last night.
It's a very tight ship up here. So, I mean, it's unfortunate for us as a news organization because whatever Mr. Quirk's answers would be, and in fact, this was almost uniformly across the selection committee and the chair, we don't know what they think about it because they won't answer questions about it. And that makes it very hard for us to have parts of our reporting complete, and it makes it hard for you as voters to assess whether or not these are people you want to represent them or whether you think something wrong had happened.
Thank you. So we're going to jump into a couple of questions for both the candidates, which I think is important. And it's some of the areas of interest, particularly here in Grimsby. So what is your platform? And I'll go over to Jeff on regional transit and transit in general.
Well, to connect Grimsby with Lincoln and other communities, I think we certainly need something, but right now we've been paying over $200,000 a year for 5 years, and we really don't have intermunicipal transit at all. And what I'd like to do is have a combination service using Uber. It works really well in the town of Innisfil. It's been a really good project. It's subsidized, it's relatively cost effective, actually very cost effective compared to buses. And you can get from house to house, you can get from house to the main thoroughfare. And I certainly wouldn't want full-size buses in Grimsby. I just don't think the ridership would be enough to run full-size buses. It just doesn't really make a lot of sense. Even when the Chamber of Commerce years ago, and I was on the board when we tried a bus program, we had to stop it because most times there was 2, 1, maybe 5 at the best times on the bus. So I really think that if we have full buses, they're going to be running through town empty most of the time. So an Uber will make total sense because it's going to be on a need basis. So there's not as much cost. It's just going to be sitting there. Thank you.
Thank you. Wayne, to the same question. It might be easier if we tried to hold our applause to the end. Would that be all right? I know if everybody's excited, but maybe after both have spoken, that'd be great. So Wayne?
I guess if I'm to support Jeff at the regional council level of this, all I have to say is digital. No, seriously. Back in the days when the DIA and the Chamber of Commerce did have that bus, Jeff is right. We stopped it actually. I think that Uber, looking at that proposal, is definitely the best way to go. We certainly do need some sort of transportation system within our municipality. I guess the first thing that I would question at the region is where's our $230,000 going into the transportation fund that we supposedly in the municipality, according to our incumbents, have contributed almost $1 million and got nothing in return. So that would be one of the other things I'd look at. To set up inter-municipal from other area municipalities, it's going to be very difficult. Unfortunately, we've had some of our major busing companies have stopped services within the municipality. And it actually went inter-municipal, whereas now that they're gone, I still think that people are still traveling to Hamilton or going to St. Catharines. So we certainly have to look at it. We have to look at it justifiably so and give it some attention. We can't go out and spend $2 million on buses. Now you need a place to have it operate from. You're going to have this. You're going to have, it's not going to be just $2 million. Trust me, transportation is not cheap. And you don't make money on transportation. It's there to provide a service. So I'm with Jeff. Let's look at Ulink next door to us is having a fantastic time with it. Let's look at it.
Thank you. I'm going to get Grant to weigh. Sorry, I'm going to get Grant to weigh in on this just from his observations from across the region.
Just a follow-up to the candidates, if that's okay. Yep. Because you're talking about an Uber service. I mean, radically, the situation in St. Catharines is going to be much different, or Hamilton much different. But I was wondering if you guys can explain just a little bit, because if I take an Uber, we use Uber to order McDonald's for breakfast at the paper a lot of mornings. But what do you do with people who have special needs access? You know, whether it's an elderly person who needs to get to a doctor appointment, and they're going to use Uber to get there. I mean, are these drivers certified in some fashion? Are their vehicles appropriate for those who physically may have a harder time? I think most people's idea of Uber is when the guy shows up and is a discount taxi in effect.
I believe in Innisfil, They have a couple special needs vehicles that are Uber-like, and they may be subsidized at a different level because not everyone is special needs, fortunately, but when they have it subsidized at a special level or with a special vehicle, they know who the call is coming in from, and they know the customer will ask for a special needs vehicle. I believe that's the way it works in Innisfil right now. Thank you.
Let me just add to that, because back in the days when I was with Chair Zimmerman on the Transportation Strategy Steering Committee, we started a service that was the Niagara Specialized Transit. The Niagara Specialized Transit was set up for intermunicipal individuals, and they had to go to the agency, I believe it's in St. Catharines, and give themselves an idea of going for doctor's appointments. We had many people go there for dialysis. And what this specialized transit did and does to this day, it will pick you up at your own home and deliver you to the dialysis in St. Catharines. So there is a specialized transit that started many years ago and is still in existence. So if somebody wants to know about that, and I become your counselor or not, give me a call, I'll give you a follow-up.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I'm going to move on to another transportation question. It's quite relevant, and again, thinking about a mountain access plan. Can you update us, and I'm going to ask either of the candidates this question, on the Bartlett Avenue access and immediate action being done on Mountain Street? This constituent currently lives on Oak Street, and the truck traffic is, you can actually feel, or they can actually feel their house shake. So I know what that feels like. Wayne, what is your position on a new mountain access for Grimsby or Lakewood?
It's my understanding there was a report that was supposed to come forward last year. And for some reason or other, I can't seem to get my hands on it. I don't know where that report is, and I think that report took a look at Victoria Avenue, it took a look at Mountain View, it took a look at Bartlett, and I think there was one other area. Sorry? Tuffer. Oh, okay, well that wouldn't be my suggestion anyway. Having said that, I think we've got to look at that report, but you know, I think we're missing something here, and I'm going to go back again to my days on the TSSC. Those were the days that we had suggested, the committee, including Chair Zimmerman, the Mid-Peninsula Corridor. Now, when you think about it, if you were to start going at the provincial government to put that road in, I think it would be an excellent idea to start. We started this 20 years ago. It should have been built by now, but it's not. Having said that, we need to go back to the drawing board and sit down with the province and say, listen, we've got to solve some of these issues. We don't want 4 lanes on the Cuba. So I think if you went with the Mid-Peninsula Corridor, maybe you don't want or don't need a north-south access, because what's happening is you're taking all the truck traffic from Fort Erie and running it right to the GTA. So that's certainly going to help us out here. And I think that's our concern is truck traffic.
Jeff, does that question?
Thanks, Dave. I think the truck traffic issue in Grimsby is really twofold. I'll talk about the mountain access in a minute, but one thing that our current council hasn't done is eliminated the truck traffic that's hauling fill from Mississauga, Brampton, Oakville, and hauling it up daily up Mountain Street and depositing on Kemp Road, Elm Tree Road. There's a number of deposit sites, and I first contacted my alderman in Ward 4 about a site on Overton Road, I think it probably was 2012, 2013, and he said that they were going to institute a bylaw to limit this dumping. The dump, I don't think any of these dump trucks, the fill is inspected by MTO, and there's just so many, well actually council's done nothing on it, and then now about the mountain access. Back when I was on council, Victoria was the chosen access, Victoria Avenue. The grade's much better, and in my opinion, I would push for that again. And again, I am a proponent of the Mid-Peninsula Corridor. It was talked about back in the 90s when I was on council, and I would really have liked it to have been built by this time. It would definitely reduce the truck traffic on the QEW, and there would be very little need for trucks to go up the Scarborough. Thank you.
Thank you. Grant, do you want to weigh in?
Yeah, just a quick follow-up again for both of you. So let's look at a crystal ball. Let's say you both get elected. You're mayor and regional councillor. Usually if you sit through regional council meetings, a lot of the transportation discussion focuses on the three big centers, St. Catharines, Welland, Niagara Falls. Smaller communities like Grimsby don't get a lot of love, at least in the more substantive debates. So my question is, if you're talking about something like the Mid-Penn Corridor as sort of a solution to some of the transportation woes in Grimsby, what would either of you do if you were on regional council to kind of get that as a priority on regional council? How do you get a council that is so often preoccupied with the three major centers in Niagara to pay more attention to engage in a fairly ambitious project like the Mid-Penn?
Well, again, I go back to the committee days. The committee days was teamwork. And we all worked together as a team. So that's how we got it on the plate. And I'm sure that Jeff will agree too. You got to have that team in order to go forward. So you work together, you've got to go to the province, because they're the ones that are going to be responsible for some of the road. So again, I guess the best thing, first of all, I would volunteer to go on the TSSC Transportation Committee, simply because it's an area that's been bashed and never looked at positively, and we have to start looking at it positively.
Jeff?
Thanks. What I do really is a lot like Wayne, but working with the other regional councillors from the other municipalities that the Mid-Peninsula Corridor would go through. It's going to help them. It's going to help them alleviate roads, or alleviate traffic off of their interior roads. And really, the Mid-Peninsula Corridor, I can remember the plan back then. It was to look at getting these municipalities together. And again, I'm the type of person that works together and works as a group. And I think just the openness, open dialogue, and actually listening to people would make a lot of difference. And also, we can be dealing with Hamilton Wentworth, which I know they have a ton of congestion on Stony Creek Mountain, and this would help with that as well. So we could probably get Hamilton Wentworth to have some type of joint effort. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to just keep on traffic for a little bit, and just the GO station is projected to be here in 2021, and the station is going to result in a tremendous increase in traffic. And I think we've already heard traffic is already an issue going through the downtown. And so I guess it's more than anybody anticipates. I guess you'll never really know. We know that the growth is going to be, there's going to be pressure on so much. So this is going to be a challenge for everybody. So what would you propose to overcome this? Because the last thing I think anybody wants in the town of Grimsby is the expansion of Regional Road 81. Probably because it wouldn't be possible, but the traffic there. And I think the concern is, how would you alleviate that? So it probably ties into the transit question. Wayne?
I went to the meeting the other night. They held it up at Southward Park. I think you couldn't have gotten any closer to downtown than that. I know I'm being sarcastic, but here's an issue that is dear to everybody's hearts, and they hold these meetings so far away. Having said that, there was 3 different stations of which they gave a whole bunch of variables as to, and it was in reference to the Casablanca environmental assessment, and the GO station and the GO bus. I talked to one of the gentlemen and he said, well, here's where the GO bus is presently. Here's where the possibility of it's going in the future. And he pointed to an area south of the tracks. So I said, why are you going south of the tracks? Well, it could move because we need more parking. I said, did you ever think about going to the Loblaws, whom I think own the property that is east of the Real Canadian Superstore? And it's my understanding that Metrolinx and whoever from the region was supposed to look at that property and tie it up. Because if they put a $12 million or a $15 million GO train station on the north side of the tracks, that would be perfect because there's lots of parking there. The GO train station could be there, and you could run the GO bus in. They do that at Appleby Line. If you get off at the GO bus, you get off right there at the GO station. So why could they not put them all in the same place and get away from that corridor? That corridor is going to be awful.
Jeff?
Yes, and to add to that, another way to reduce congestion would be to not exceed our official plan down in the Casablanca corridor. Why are we using bonusing and why are we exceeding our official plan with density issues? That's part of the problem right there. Our infrastructure was designed for certain densities. Everything else was designed for certain densities. Why is our planning department and the current council exceeding those densities to such an extent? And also Wayne's idea, I think that might be regional owned, that 15 acres there.
Yes.
That very well be a good idea for a GO station because it's already owned by the region.
Thank you. Grant, I'm going to ask you this question. This is getting into some of the work that you did on the NPCA. And it's a term we've heard a lot. Do you believe that there is a Caslin, referring to Regional Chair Caslin, cabal at work at the region? Sorry, it's a question from the floor, and I'm asking it. So, and Grant is placed into a lot of what you've heard.
So the term, the cabal.
Oh, sorry, did I say it wrong?
Yeah,
sorry.
cabal.
The cabal.
Kabul is a city in Afghanistan.
I don't get out much.
The term was coined by my colleague Doug Harrod, who was our columnist at the paper for many, many years. He's retired now, but you can still find him on Twitter kind of losing his bananas a little bit, and he's begun to write columns again for us. And what he meant by that when he wrote it is that there's sort of an alliance of sorts on regional council. This particular iteration of council, they tend to be more right of center, and they tend to vote as a bloc, and they tend to work in a somewhat organized fashion. So if the question is, do I believe the cabal is real?
Yes.
I think that it's fairly obvious. And we have more work coming on this that you're going to see in the standard, hopefully before the election. Yeah, indeed. I mean, there is a concerted effort by a fairly well-organized group of councillors to put forward a particular agenda. This is not super uncommon on city councils and regional councils. I mean, three of you are all experienced. You will know this is so to a degree in which councillors tend to, form cliques and they tend to band together in some way or another. I think what makes this group different is the way in which they've banded together, the way in which they've made those decisions. So, they're there. They're absolutely real, and they have held the balance of power on council since 2014.
But could you, to pursue this a little bit, because, I think we're all in a bit of a unique position to read your stories, but you're the one covering it, and to the degree in which it's become more vicious, and maybe that ties into the police chief and the $1 million payout, and maybe the way in which Bill Hodson from Lincoln was treated at the NPCA and what it did to his life and his personal life. I mean, you saw the inside of some of those stories.
So I guess I could put it this way. If you look at the stories that we've done over this term of council, at the St. Catharines Standard, and my sister paper is the Niagara Falls Review and the Welland Tribune, you see the same cast of characters always involved. Whether it's at the Police Services Board, whether it's on Regional Council as a whole, or whether it's at the NPCA. So when there's issues at the NPCA, you see that, by and large, some of those councillors, you see them again at the Police Services Board when something happens in the case of Chief McGuire, who was given an inexplicable, virtually $1 million payout just so he would leave. Debbie was referring to the censure of Lincoln Councillor Bill Hodgson, who was a member of the NPCA. And we've investigated that censure, which, myself and my colleague Bill Sawchuk, what we found is that there was really nothing there. It was a big nothing burger, as they say. It was a very politically motivated thing. And it's the same cast of characters. It's, Mr. Quirk is among them. I think Doug Harry did a column a couple of weeks ago for us in which he kind of tried to list the sort of full-time members of the cabal, as he would say. He uses the term tongue-in-cheek, but it nonetheless is true, and it's the same kind of group. It's Chair Caslin, it's Councillor Gale, it's Councillor Nunziata, it's Councillor Timms, it's Councillor Quirk, Councillor O'Patty. They tend to work in a fairly concentrated effort. So I guess the best way I can answer your question is that when you are looking at these different incidences across the last 4 years at the region, at the NPCA, and at the Police Services Board, on a whole host of things, not just the ones we've talked about here. There were things like the councillor expense issue. There was the night, my colleague's stuff was illegally seized at the region, which we call the night they threw Bill Sawchuk out. Those of you who know country music will get the reference. So you see the same politicians involved again and again and again. And the feedback we get at the paper is usually like, how is it it's the same, 5, 6 councillors every single time that seems to be attached to it. And again, as I noted before, one of our frustrations is they don't often talk to us when we have these questions for them. I would like nothing more than for Mr. Quirk and for the other mayoral candidate to be up here to take questions. I would prefer to be kind of in Debbie's seat and doing my role as a more traditional moderator, or to have them answer questions for stories that we do, and they just avoided answering those questions. So it's a little tough for us to speak, for me to speak to their motives, other than to say they tend to be the same people involved in each one of those stories.
So I'm going to ask a question of Wayne, and then I'm going to ask a different question of Jeff. But Wayne, would you support having at least 50% of the Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority board members being citizens rather than elected officials?
Under the circumstances, absolutely yes. And I'll tell you why, because there's a lot of good people out there that have much more knowledge than, say, somebody like myself on the conservation. And I'll tell you one gentleman as an example, and I'm going to say his name is Bruce McKenzie as an example. He has so much experience in that field. I'd be more than pleased to see somebody like him and of that caliber to be on the board, because these people have lived all their life. He was with the Conservation Authority in Hamilton. So it's those kind of people and those kind of resources that we have an opportunity to get. We should use that opportunity to do it, and I agree with it. There's got to be a change.
Thank you. Greg?
Just really quickly to that point, on the Auditor General's report on the NPCA, one of the things the Auditor General found was there was sort of a general issue. I mean, it's highlighted a great deal in the NPCA, but it's a problem with Conservation Authority structures more broadly, which is if your Conservation Authority board members are all politicians chosen by political interest and the different municipalities that are supposed to be represented there, those representatives are free, particularly when they're elected councillors, to vote in the interest of their municipality. And what she found was that is not always in the best interest of the Conservation Authority and its mandate. So the structure itself creates a kind of a dissonance between a councillor who's been elected who would say, look, I've been elected by the town of Grimsby, my priority is the citizens of Grimsby and what's best for Grimsby. But maybe that means the NPCA would deny a particular development in Grimsby because that's its mandate. And what she's found is that these members tend to err on the side of the municipality as opposed to the Conservation Authority, which creates a problem. So one of her recommendations is to start to ask the government to add more clarity to those roles or change the membership of the board so that that conflict doesn't exist.
Jeff, this is for you, and it's an environmental dumping question. It's now going on 1.5 years that residents of Kemp Road West not participating in the dumping of waste fill on their respective properties have had to put up with dangerous traffic conditions, noise, verbal threats of personal harm, dump truck drivers, I apologize for this, urinating on the roadside, and most worrisome, elevated levels of diesel exhaust fumes, unknown carcinogen. Most of the aforementioned concerns equally apply to the residents of Mountain Street. Mr. Jordan, if elected mayor, will you move for an immediate halt to all fill dumping activities? Will you also call for environmental testing and monitoring of the fill dump sites by the proper authorities at the property owner's expense?
Absolutely. I really think that the province has got to be involved in this because I'm not sure what's in all these loads. And I guess apparently I got a phone call last Saturday. They ran truckload after truckload up Mountain Street, and there was the town's bylaw officer. They know he's not there on Saturdays, and I guess police were called because there was problems with the trucks turning at Kemp and Mountain Street. We don't know what's in these loads. We don't even know where they're coming from. One reason I found where ones were coming from is a citizen actually trailed them, and they trailed them back to, I think this one was from Mississauga. So obviously our town is open to allowing whatever to come in, and it's in the drainage plan of the 40 Creek. So it's the water that goes into Lake Ontario. And another resident told me that it had, sometimes the flow out of these areas into the tributaries of the 40 Creek, the color of the water has changed a lot since this dumping has been done. So we're not sure what is being dumped now, and I think the town is basically, I think I could call them negligent to allow this many loads of dumping on Kemp Road and up on the escarpment. The escarpment residents have been left in the dark about it, and it's just not right.
Thank you. I've got a lot of questions about transparency. And actually it's interesting, it's come up of all the debates that so far that I've been at. So I'm going to try to bridge them all together here. And I'll start with you. Wayne, will you make, I've got to start with Jeff because it's really related to being the mayor first and foremost, and then there's a question I will ask, and then I'm going to ask Grant about issues of transparency. Jeff, will you make the operation of financing of Grimsby's hydro companies more transparent? And how would you do it? And I just think the whole concept of transparency is an interesting word. You have to practice it. You can't just say it. So could you give us some examples of how you'd make government in Grimsby more transparent and your actions at the region?
Well, to make government in Grimsby more transparent, it's very easy. We can start first by getting the committee and council meetings streamed on YouTube. Why? I don't have anything against Cogeco, and Cogeco can still film as well. But what we need to do is have all these meetings streamed so the residents of Grimsby can look at a meeting, watch it whenever they want. Another thing I'd like to do, to add to council, is an open mic, where for 20 minutes before each council meeting, residents can actually speak and have their concerns heard. And as far as the hydro board goes for transparency, what I'd like to do, and hopefully we get change that we need in Grimsby, if we have enough like-minded people on council, we can overturn council's decision to keep it private, and we can ask the books to be opened. And I really think that makes perfect sense. And now to get to the region, I would actually like to just carry on this type of transparency right to the region. I know the region's meetings are a available. But just everything with these secret meetings with groups of people at the region, I hope there's enough of a change regional wide that we get enough of these people out of here so we have open region meetings again where everyone can work together. Thank you.
Thank you. Wayne, do you want to talk about what you might do to bring transparency to regional council and government?
Well, I guess I was first going to respond to what would I do with the hydro, but I guess I'm not allowed because I don't have a vote. I'll tell you what I can do.
Now, if you want to waste your time on that part,
Well, not really.
so it's up to you.
I think you got my answer.
Yeah.
Certainly have to have transparency, and many of the times that I've been at the region, to regional council meetings, the transparency comes from when you attend the subcommittee meetings, for instance, Public Works, or any of the other committee meetings. You should have the opportunity as a resident to at least be recognized and be able to speak on some issues or issues that are related to the agenda. I don't have a problem with that. And even if it's not on the agenda, to bring up your issue or to bring up your point. But I think a lot of the stuff has to come from the committee level because that's where the decisions are made. Those decisions are carried forward from there to regional council. Regional council, in a lot of cases, I would consider looking at that as being a rubber stamp. So I would say that the resident has every right to attend every subcommittee meeting and have it say there.
Certainly. Grant, I'm going to ask you this question because I know it's an interesting one for you. If we hadn't had your reporting on the NPCA, the hiring of the CAO, the firing of the police chief who actually lives in Grimsby, and the $1 million payout, and the potential payout coming for the next CAO, I mean, how does that transparency question for you? How is it reflective and how challenging is it with your work? If you know what I mean.
Yeah, no, exactly what you mean. I mean, I'll put it this way. If we had not been investigating all the things we talked about, the huge one we did, which is the hiring of the CAO, but reporting on the MPCA, the reporting on Chief McGuire's buy-in, the reporting on the regional councillor expenses, if we were not doing that, you wouldn't know. Period, full stop. One of the issues in my industry has been cutbacks for many, many years. The Standard I work at now is still an excellent newspaper, but we are a fraction in terms of reporting staff of what we used to be. We've made kind of, I guess you could say, a very broad umbrella. Transparency, one of our major investigative focuses at the Standard, because in mid-2016, we began to see a trend of we were working on some regional stories. One of them being, for those of you who do follow news in St. Catharines, will know about the Burgoyne Bridge story, which was this very expensive bridge that was built. There was an expensive audit that was done. That report was being kept secret. It wasn't going to be released to the public. And there were councillors who were saying, both on the record and off the record, "Oh, Grant, this thing is the worst thing you've ever seen. It makes the public works scandals in Quebec look like nothing. And if you know about public works scandals in Quebec, I mean, you're talking about almost mafia level criminality." So we thought that was shocking because whatever issues may have existed with the bridge, we certainly hadn't seen anything that was that bad. I got a copy of the report, even though it was kept confidential, and lo and behold, there was nothing anywhere near that serious in that report. There was nothing that came close to approaching criminality. And of course, the OPP has now reviewed it and dismissed any possibility of there being any criminal charges with it. So that led us to kind of huddle together as a newspaper and say, okay, what are we not being told? What is the public not being told about serious issues? So we've really turned a lot of our focus on trying to understand and describe for you as our readers, what is your government doing? What are your politicians doing? What are your leaders doing, and why are they doing it? And that's why we've done the reporting that we've done. And I should point out, in almost all of those stories, there's not a lot of voluntary information coming out. You know, it's not like the Police Services Board said, oh, you know what, we just had this bugaboo about the chief and we had our own political ambitions about hiring the chief. We're going to spend a ton of public money to get rid of this guy to hire somebody else. We only found out what happened after, you know, weeks and weeks of banging away at that story until we had it to get to the red hot center of it. So the message is sort of twofold. Transparency has become enough of an issue at the regional government level. It's become a major focus of our work at the Standard. And then more broadly, it shows you what would happen to your community, both here in Grimsby and across the region, if you didn't have robust, strong reporting from daily reporters who are doing the work at a high level. Because if you don't have that, what you have is partisan spin, which we see online, true fake news. I hate to use the term, but it exists. Or fairly shallow reporting that's about grip and grins and handshakes and nice photographs. What you need is a press that keeps your government accountable. And so this is why it's National Newspaper Week, by the way, if I can have a pitch. So support your local press, because we're the ones who are trying to inform you so that come October 22nd, you can make as informed a choice as possible.
Thank you very much. Premier Ford has signaled he wants smaller government, less municipalities, less councillors. Richard Coach, would you support? No mayors on regional council, fewer overall politicians on regional government, no regional government, fewer municipalities, which means Grimsby could disappear or be amalgamated with Lincoln, West Lincoln. So, Jeff, I'm going to throw this one to you.
Well, at region, we could look at a combination of, if you wanted to actually eliminate regional government, it would probably take a long time, but we could have certain services that are region-wide be operated by larger boards, and then other services, keep them in the municipality. I think we could do it with less people, but the problem we have is 12 municipalities, and each of them, well, a couple don't have a regional council.
We're down to one that doesn't have a regional council. West Lincoln got a regional council, and Wainfleet's the only one that doesn't.
Okay, so I think it's a really difficult question because the Niagara region has been so ingrained and here for so many years, but there are a lot of other ways to cut money other than having cutting representation. Representation tends to be the cheapest cut, and it's not always the best. Another question in Grimsby, someone was talking about going down to one alderman per ward. Well, we probably, if we had a hydro board the way it is now, and only one alderman per ward, we'd probably hear nothing about the biodigester. So I think councillors, as long as they're not overpaid, as long as they're transparent, and as long as they don't run up expense accounts by padding them and charging for multiple meetings, I think with good politicians at the regional level even, you can get value for money. Thank you.
Right?
Well, I guess I'd be the first one to get cut, wouldn't I? Having said that, I go back to the days of the Berkeley report when we looked at taking 12 municipalities and we ended up having 4 municipalities, or 4 areas of municipalities. We got lumped in with, there was Grimsby, Lincoln, West Lincoln, Wainfleet area. I think that was, yeah, it was just 3 in West Niagara. Is it a good thing? It is to some degree, but it's also a bad thing. When you look at the size of Lincoln and the size of West Lincoln, we pay for our roads in Grimsby. You turn around and go into an amalgamation like that, now you're going to have to pay for the roads in Lincoln and West Lincoln. And let me tell you, those municipalities are far, far larger than ours. So I hope it wouldn't affect the tax rate. Having said that, I think we need less governance But I don't know exactly what the answer is, because it's pretty, like Jeff said, it's pretty difficult. I mean, there's 450 or 500,000 people in Niagara, and I think we've got 131 politicians.
Yes,
Well, that is unbelievable, you know, compared to Toronto. But having said that, you know what, I think it's going to come down to tube, and I think Mr. Ford is going to take a hard look at it. And what's going to come out of it, I don't know. But I guess looking forward, yeah, we can do without more governance, but I don't want less governance in the municipality where you've got 4 councillors that are running the entire municipality. We've got problems with 8. I think 4 would be even worse.
So I guess that's a good question for you, Jeff, before I turn this over. Do you see the size of regional, I see the size of local government? I mean, you have 2 reps per ward. Do you see that changing?
I really don't see that changing, particularly at the municipal level. You're talking, I guess the aldermen make around $15,000 a year. I think if we have good people in there, we can get excellent value for the $15,000 a year. And I think you have much more of a democracy when you have 8 people on council and 8 minds, and that way you won't get voting together. And well, actually, this council, I guess that's an exception, but you will get people that discuss things and people that speak up. And I think 8 people gives Grimsby great representation, and if there were 8 accountable people and 8 people that were available all the time, we'd be probably the best represented municipality in Ontario. Thank you.
So Grant, you've been around this amalgamation horn many times, and what are your views?
Well, okay, so from a reporter's point of view, there's a couple things. This is an odd election issue because it's ultimately not decided here. These 2 guys could have the single best ideas you've ever heard about governance reform, and it could not mean a hill of beans because this is decided by the province. We've already seen that Premier Ford's government will act very decisively, very quickly, without consultation when it wants to, whereas the previous government kind of dragged its heels a little bit. But one of the things to note about governance in Niagara was, remember we were going to have a regional chairs race? That was supposed to happen. It also got cancelled by the Ford government. Part of the legislation that made that happen also required there was going to be some sort of governance review done before the next election. So this was coming. I know it's sort of trendy to go, because Ford is sort of the startling character, to sort of say, oh, this is all his fault, he's forcing us to talk about governance reform. It was coming. And so I think it's important that our communities at least have a voice. I mean, that voice may or may not mean it very much, we don't know. The only other thing I'll say about amalgamation governance reform is this. Democracy is supposed to be messy. You know what the most efficient form of government is? Autocracy. Right? They make the trains run on time without an idling. Part of the rationale right now in these conversations about less politicians is it's cheaper, but Niagara Region has $1 billion budget. So salaries for politicians don't really amount for a huge amount. The question around the money they spend, both in terms of their salaries and their expenses, is how is it being used and why is it being spent? That's the question you should be asking. But the other part of it is I don't know that I want a super efficient democracy that makes decisions quickly and there's not that much debate. I mean, that's not the way democracy functions. It's supposed to be messy because people are messy. So I don't know, I don't have any magic bullets in terms of what it may or may not look like in 4 years, but it's something that we need to keep at top of mind and figure out where that balance is between efficiency and representation.
Thank you. Thank you. One of the questions that's been coming up quite a bit is the extension of Livingston Avenue and the environmental assessment process, and I think there was an open house just recently on that as well. It is a concern because it was an issue that was kind of put to bed in the last term of office, but has sort of climbed back onto the agenda. I guess, Wayne, to you, is that extension needed in the community?
I don't think it is, because it's a road to nowhere. And besides that, they've got the road going through the woodlot. So I don't agree with that, because I'm not a full environmentalist, but we've got to start protecting what we've got. I'm not sure if the EA, Debbie is back on the board, but I do know that they have talked about the EA for Casablanca and the interchange at Casablanca and whatnot, but I'm not for the Livingston Avenue extension at all. I think that our representative at the region has got to stop this because, as I said, it's a road that goes nowhere. How many more lanes? Somebody pointed out, like, I think we've got 12 lanes already that run east and west. Why do we need another 4? You know, because you got the service roads, you got them on both sides. You got number 8 highway. You got Livingston already that runs to the end of Elgin Street. So we don't need any more. And besides that, it's Greenbelt. Protect Greenbelt. That's all. Thanks.
Jeff, same question.
Yes, it was off the table completely, and the region wasn't even looking at it. And then Grimsby flipped and put it back on the table. They ignored everyone who supports the woodlot, and I really think there's a few aldermen and perhaps the mayor that have a vested interest that they're pushing for. And it is frozen as Greenbelt land till 2025, I believe. But it doesn't make any sense to put the road through there, like Wayne says. That land's not going to be developed till then, and we have no reason to believe that the Greenbelt's boundaries are going to change. They didn't change anywhere in Ontario in the last review, and we don't feel that they will change again. So putting a road through it before, even talking about putting a road through it before makes absolutely no sense in my mind. Thank you.
I'm going to ask this question of Brent. Do you think there's a change coming in local government from your perspective? And do you get that feeling? And do you think it's going to be from where you sit and the number of municipalities that we've covered over the years? Do you get a palpable sense of change in government? And do you think it's region-wide?
Oh, that's interesting. I do most of my work at St. Catharines, so my lenses are a little less Grimsby-centric than everybody here. I will say this, I'll caveat all this by saying historically Niagara voter turnouts are very low, and that usually is not a huge indicator for change at government. However, I have never seen communities this angry at their regional government. I've never seen people this engaged. When you're a journalist, especially now with social media, what we get a lot of is chatter on Twitter, chatter on Facebook, and they tend to be the same people time and time again. I call them the chattering classes, but they tend to be the same kind of group of people who will inevitably always comment on a story and always have something to say about the news. What's happening now is I'm getting phone calls and emails every single day of the week. I get stopped in the street, and if it doesn't happen, if I don't get stopped on a day, I tend to be a little sulky, to be honest. But in all seriousness, and they're just regular people. They're just people like you who may not be the ones who typically get up on a soapbox in your community or on your Twitter feed or on your Facebook page if you use those, who are mad, who don't like what's happened at the regional level and they want some sort of change. And one of the interesting things about St. Catharines is one of those municipalities that is really going to dictate how much Niagara region changes in terms of its council composition. There are 22 candidates running. 22. And what's for regional council. And what's very interesting about that field is there's not a lot of duds. Like what sometimes happens in municipal elections, especially in bigger centers, is you'll have one or two credible candidates, and then there's the guy who wears the tinfoil hat who wants to protect us from UFO people, right? There was a guy in St. Catharines once who was a literal thief. He was a convicted thief, and he had this heavy Russian accent. His campaign motto was, "Vote for Boris, he is smaller crook." Best campaign slogan ever. But what's happened in St. Catharines is it's a field of 22, either they're incumbents who are already on council, so they have the power of incumbency, which helps candidates in local elections all the time, or they're very well-known, very credible community people, something like these gentlemen who are former politicians who are getting back in the game. Sometimes it's just people who are they're not politicians, but they're active in the community and they're putting their hat in the ring. So yeah, there's a definite possibility for change. I think in all the elections I've covered in 20 years doing this job, this one feels like there's more of a sort of a chance for a very broad change. Usually there's a small turnover. We may, if outrage translates into voter turnout, we may see a real change across communities in the region, yeah.
Thank you very much. There's a question that keeps coming up at every one of these events. It's about the biodigester, and I think we've heard a lot about it. But there's a recent question that has been posed about the biodigester doubling in size. So I guess I want to pose that question to both the candidates and say, what would you support going forward? Wayne?
As far as I'm concerned, get rid of it. I have been against it. I have been against it from day one. As a matter of fact, I had the support of Jeff, and I'm not sure if Dave Cadwell was there at the time, but having said that, the original business plan that came to the table that I saw was a 7-year return of investment. Well, they were saying that the biodigester was running at 100%. Well, if you do the math, it can't run at 100%. It's impossible. And if you look at the statistics of all the other biodigesters across North America, it can't run at 100%. So I never ever agreed to accept the biodigester. Now, how do we get rid of it? Well, I think maybe you should put it up for auction, because there may be some other companies that have big, deep pockets that might want to buy it for, and I'm not going to be, say, 10 cents on the dollar. I'd like to get a quarter anyway. But having said that, we can't continue. It hasn't hit your taxes yet, ladies and gentlemen, but I can tell you it isn't going to be long that it's going to hit our tax base, because there's no money left.
Jeff?
Well, it's really a hard question to answer. And the reason it's so hard to answer is I don't know everything about it. I don't know a lot about it. I don't know if it's making money. I kind of think it's not. No one, when Rob made his delegation and said that it's losing 151 million a year, 1.2 million a year. Not one of the incumbents and the people that sit on the board said no, that number is inflated. So possibly it is. But really we can't make a decision until we get enough people on council to actually open up the books and know all about it. I'm probably leaning that it's not making money, and I'm leaning to that there is a lot wrong with it, because I think if it was all a bed of roses, what would be happening right now is that the current council would be telling you everything, because they would have nothing to hide. So I think, well, I really hope after October 22nd that we have enough people new on council so we can actually take control of one of our biggest investments back again. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have about 10 minutes left, and if you have any questions, I encourage you to stay behind and talk to the candidates. I'm going to pose a question to Grant, and then I'm going to ask both Jeff and Wayne to give a bit of their vision for the next 4 years. If we have any more questions, though, we'll take a couple of those before we end it. But Grant, given where you've sat with this council over the last 4 years, and the potential for you on a national stage to win an award for your CAO investigation, just imagine if you didn't have these stories to write about. But what would be your wish for local government for the next 4 years?
And you got 2 minutes.
I this in such a way that means I don't have to work as much and I get more sleep. I'll put it this way. This council's been unusual in terms of what we've had to do with the newspaper to cover it. Believe it or not, there was a time when the paper would cover regional council, and it was sort of like, oh, ambulance dispatch is an issue. How is that going to work? Or this road needs filling, or smoking bylaw, or something like that. Now it's more of how the heck did a job worth $230,000 a year get manipulated this way? So that the other candidates had no chance and didn't have a snowball chance at Hayden's. So, as a journalist, this is fantastic because it keeps me super busy. I don't know that if this is the kind of stuff that's going on behind the scenes of government is helpful for the community. So, as a journalist, bring it on. I can do this until I drop. As a citizen, you kind of want your government to be a little bit more responsible so that you don't have transparency problems, you don't have accountability problems. You know that the hiring of a high-paid civil servant is a process that is transparent and functions the way it should and is fair. So,
And your advice to the candidates?
Be honest with the press. Listen, don't lie to somebody like me, because I'll find out eventually. A huge chunk of my job right now is comparing today's leaks with yesterday's lies. And it's exhausting, but it's what we have to do. If you're going to represent the public, face the hard questions. If you've made a decision that puts you under pressure and the press are knocking at your door, answer the questions honestly. If you made a mistake, which we all make mistakes, I live in a business where if I make a mistake, I actually have to put that correction before the public every day. You learn humility very fast when you do that. Politicians don't like to admit it. As a very quick example, when they legally took my colleague's stuff, they seized his stuff. We asked the CAO 17 times in one interview, why do you think you have the legal authority to seize a reporter's equipment? He wouldn't answer the question over 17 times. So I published, he didn't answer the question 17 times. Don't do that. Don't do that. Because the people in this audience deserve the answers. And they deserve to know what you're doing, and they deserve to know what your motives are. And when you make a mistake, people are actually more forgiving about it than you probably realize. If you screw up, as long as you're honest about it and put your best foot forward the next time, they tend to be more forgiving. When you cover it up and somebody like me eventually digs deep enough into the trash heap to find it, then you start to go, yeah, I kind of understand why they killed Marie Antoinette. People get angry when they think they're being lied to, and I think that's the best advice I can give anybody who's running for office.
Jeff, this is giving you a chance to sort of give your vision over the next 4 years. How do you propose to deal with the development, the intensification of downtown, Doran Avenue, which is the example, and how dense does the town have to get before a halt is called to it?
Intensification is a word that the current council and developers like to use to cram as many things and as many units into a small area. And they say that the province, you hear this every day, that the current council is saying the province is mandating this intensification. Well, we have an official plan, and we just need to maintain the densities to our official plan. We've already passed Niagara Region's 2031 growth projections. So what we really need to do is just hold back a bit and look at our community and see where we need to add units, where we need to hold back, where we don't need to add it. So really what we're doing is trying to build out as fast as we can. Once a developer finishes a unit or once Grimsby's built out, that developer moves away and they leave us with the problems. And that's just not the way to go. We need a council that cares about the community and is willing to have a long-term vision and not just build each building to cram as many units in as they can. So that's where I really stand on intensification. And just to further Grant's about being humble and honest and admitting your mistakes, then you have nothing to hide and your story stays the same all the time. So you can have integrity. And I think we do that definitely with openness, transparency, being available, and just listening to people, not telling people what to do. So I think this council, hopefully we get enough of the change that we can be much better listeners. Thank you.
Thank you. Just before Wayne, can I just ask those members, those people who are running for local government, regional government here, could you just stand up and wave, please, who is here tonight? Randy? Yeah? David Cadwell? Rich? Who else? Oh, Dorothy? And who else is missing? Oh, Dave is here. Leanne's here. Thank you. Leanne, thank you for coming. It's important here. Wayne, so your vision for, and you have a lot to do with the official plan, regional policy plan, so you can sort of talk about that too, because you're quite familiar with that. And your vision for Grimsby.
Thank you. I'm going to stand up
Okay.
for a minute. One of the first things I'm going to do, I guess everybody's gone up and down Main Street, and I don't know where our representation has been in putting this on the map to have it fixed. It's going to be one of the roughest roads going. Number 8 highway from Casablanca to Oaks Road, it's a death trap. And if anybody wants to try and ride a bicycle there, please go on the sidewalk, because you'll kill yourself getting the ruts. It's awful. My other vision, part of my vision, is I will make every effort to stop the environmental assessment on the expansion of Livingston. Because I don't believe it should be there, period. Debbie, if you want me to sort of touch on the official town plan.
Not so much that, about the density. I think the density is a question right across the region.
There's no question. And wait until Lincoln starts getting into the Putticombs. Brutal climbing, not Putticombs. That's going to be another huge project. There should have been, when we done the official town plan, and when the province said that we have to look at densities, they should have had 2 official town plan ideas. And the one is the Toronto concept, and the other one should have been for municipalities of less than 100,000. We are guided by the province that the intensification is what they want in Toronto. So we have to be there at the table and talk to them a little bit more and try and get them to change that, because the intensification in the municipalities, I spent, I think it was about 6 or 8 weeks of hours and hours in drawing the official town plan for Grimsby. At the end of the day, today's council, they don't even go by it. They could care less. They forgot about what we said about low, medium, and high density. So we have to, we certainly have to have a council that's going to look at the official town plan. And you know what? If the chief planner doesn't want to go according to the official town plan, well, I won't suggest what I do with it. But here.
One last question for you, Grant. And again, thank you very much for being here tonight. You've added a ton of value to this. I don't even think it's a debate. It's a warm fireside chat. But term limits. In your view on term limits for council? Depending on who the council is, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, Mark Twain said, something like politicians are diapers, you have to change them frequently. I don't know. I mean, it's interesting. I've always kind of been an advocate. When I was a columnist for the paper, I was an advocate for term limits. It on the one hand, it does kind of it cuts both ways. It's kind of a curative towards some of the rot that can set in if you have the same people serving over long periods of time. However, the danger of really short term limits, and it's a very acute one, is that politicians cease to have long-term vision, and they cease to have institutional experience. You look at a guy like Jim Bradley in St. Catharines, who's been serving for nearly 50 years.
44 years.
40 years. I mean, there is literally nobody in Ontario who knows more about provincial politics and the way government works and how to get stuff done than Jim Bradley. And that's a virtue of him having 4 decades plus of experience in government. If you have really short term limits, say only 2 terms, right? This is one of the problems in the United States quite frequently, is that the politician is only concerned about, well, how do I get reelected? And so it's a tricky sort of thing. I wouldn't advocate for something too short. You don't want people there forever. But basically, that's an answer. It's like, I don't know, maybe. It's a tough question, but at the same time, I don't know that it's a particularly pressing issue at the present time. I think Niagara and Grimsby has enough issues to deal with that questions of do we have term limits or not. I mean, that's a question of whole reform of our government system that needs to be well thought out. I think there are much more pressing issues for the region right now.
Thank you very much. We come to the magic hour of about 8:35. We were hoping to sort of wrap this up so you have a bit of time to meet with the candidates after. I want to thank you again for coming tonight. It's important that you have this opportunity to see what's happening at the region, and Grant, your perspective has made such a difference, I think, for people, and again, it's live streaming. I just want to end with this. The strongest democracy flourishes from frequent and lively debate, but they endure when people of every background and belief find a way to set aside their differences in the service of a greater purpose. Barack Obama. Thank you so much.